Manufacturers and producers are obsessed with digitization, but the numbers don't always add up. My guest is Andy Webster. He is global capital projects lead with Accenture Industry X. Hello, Andy. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate you having me today.
And thanks for being with me. So how come so many digitization projects fail to deliver on the expected ROI?
Well, the engineering and construction industry is one that has trailed in the adoption of digital pretty significantly. I think if you were to look across different surveys that people have done, it is one of the least digitized industries out there. And so when you look at what's happened in manufacturing industries, you see almost a double in productivity over the past 50 years. But when you look at engineering construction, it's been relatively flat, and in some geographies actually downward in productivity. And so it's not a mature industry from a digital standpoint. So there's a lot of human factors that come into play in adopting digital investments in the industry.
Yeah, when you cite those examples of construction, are you talking about companies that have not even embraced any kind of digitization project, or they have done that but have failed to realize the full benefits that they were hoping for?
Yeah, we're actually seeing a pretty large interest in digital now in the industry. So I would say the industry is pretty activated in terms of interest in digital and pursuing the opportunities. In a recent research report that we did, the feedback from over 700 industry executives, 9 in 10 of the respondents said that they were using average or good data in their projects. So there's definitely a foundation there to leverage digital and data. But what we did hear back was really only a third of the respondents in the survey said that they were seeing returns from their digital investments in a positive way.
Maybe we should back up for a definition here, because digital is an awfully trendy word these days, and sometimes it's hard to pin down exactly what it means. What do we mean when we talk about these companies embracing digitization? What form is that taking?
So in this industry, it can mean a lot of things, but engineering and construction in general has a lot of paper-driven processes on the back end at the construction site. You've got a lot of equipment that's disconnected, and then also within the project, you have in the end-to-end life cycle, you have a lot of disciplines that need to work together and collaborate, contractors across the supply chain that need to collaborate. And those integration points really are opportunities for leakage of value in the project value chain. And the industry as a whole has not figured out, like other industries have, how to stitch it together effectively.
Data analytics, though, is a big part of this, right?
Absolutely. Analytics, both on the front end to optimize projects, and then on the back end to give better visibility into the risks during execution so that you can efficiently and effectively execute your projects. Analytics has a huge opportunity to transform the industry. And we see unicorn investments showing up out of Silicon Valley as an example that are focusing both on the digitization side, so end-to-end workflow digitization, and also bringing analytics into the space.
No lack of money pouring into this space for sure, but again, a result of what results it's realizing is the big question. Another area in which we're seeing a huge gap in expected performance versus results is that of the deployment of logistics control towers. Why specifically in the logistics area? Where are the challenges and the difficulties there that make digitization fall short of expectations?
So, what we see in the industry is there's disconnects between the participants in the supply chain, as well as even within a company, you may have disconnects between the disciplines that work to deliver a project. One of the executives that we talked with, that was one of his comments, was if we could just even within a company's four walls, break down the silos between disciplines, that projects would be executed with digital more effectively. But what historically has happened is the tools are applied within the silos and not effectively across the silos. And so that, the whole control tower concept, which we've seen lots of industries start to adopt in the supply chain space, there's a huge opportunity for that in the capital project space, but we need the industry to really focus on collaboration across the supply chain more effectively.
Yeah, as you say, not just within the organization, control towers that control your relations with your outside partners. And I would think in the case of logistics, it's especially vital to be able to hook up in a digital manner with your logistics providers. What I understand, my understanding is that a lot of logistics providers are pretty savvy about digitization these days. Am I wrong in that? Or is there a lot of work to be done?
I think the capabilities there in the industry from a supply chain perspective, it's the participants in the industry, in the construction space, in the engineering space, and even back into the owner or investor side, don't really have the sophistication in this space to move the ball forward effectively. And I think that when you look at the opportunity there, it requires a little bit of a mindset change that maybe isn't necessarily digitally oriented. It's more around collaboration, collaborative contracting, and getting the right kind of agreements in place.
Yeah, especially when you get into some of the smaller providers of services like owner operators and the like. I'm sure they're likely to be a lot less sophisticated when it comes to digital technologies, right?
That's right. You have varying levels of sophistication across the supply chain. So, I think that, one of the things that we see, and this is one of the actions that we would say our clients can take to really move the needle in terms of performance is, especially on the owner operator side, a trend towards investing in data sharing infrastructure. So more effective collaboration capability to enable the projects that they're executing across the value chain to share information more effectively. That's a key trend that came back in our research from the survey analysis of the outperformers versus the rest of the pack.
To what extent has the COVID-19 pandemic hampered efforts to realize the full benefits of digitization?
Yeah, so we did take advantage of the survey that we recently completed, and in the research, one of the feedback points that we heard was that pre-FID, so pre-final investment decision, almost 2/3 of the respondents said that they expected projects to be put on hold or delayed. So pretty significant impact in the construction industry. And then if you look at the projects that were actually in execution, roughly 1/3 of those were expecting some cost escalation, scope adjustments would be required, or the other aspect that I think was a takeaway for us from the survey response was that roughly half of the industry participants said they were putting on hold their improvement programs. So how do they actually affect improvements in their business? Roughly half of the respondents were freezing or slowing those investments.
The very fact they're undertaking such investments indicates that there's some commitment to the concept, perhaps at the highest levels of these companies, maybe the CEO, maybe the people in the C-suite, but then the difficulty becomes filtering that commitment down to the actual execution level, the various levels of management. Is that indeed the issue here, that these projects start at the top, but they don't filter down because for whatever reason, human reluctance to embrace new technology, new ideas, whatever?
Yeah, Bob, I think there's a couple things that are really hitting on that were the other two key actions that we would say are the recommendations coming out of the analysis that we did. The first one was, again, in that outperform group, there was a large group or a large percentage of the outperformers where both on the owner operator side and on the engineering construction contractor side, where they had C-level sponsorship of their digital improvement initiatives. So that kind of sponsorship is important to break the silos in the organization and really drive the improvements across the business. And it's also important when you look at the value chain and driving better collaboration with your business partners, you need that C-level executive to executive sponsorship to really make sure that your counterparties understand that you're serious about making change here. And then the other factor that maybe is more boots on the ground oriented is outperformers in our research had invested in data coaches, data stewards who would help the workforce who maybe don't have the digital savviness come up the curve on how to effectively use data and digital technologies in construction.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've heard a few tips here on how to get more value out of your digitization project. You talked about C-level sponsorship. You talked about breaking down silos, collaboration across the enterprise. Any other ideas just to kind of leave us with in general, a takeaway for how companies can get better value from their investments in this technology?
Well, I think one key aspect that I think the industry needs to really push is industry collaboration, and whether that's through independent organizations that may be industry specific to kind of align on data standards, or directly with your counterparties. But thinking in the context of the commercial relationship. So in this industry, contracts frequently are set up win-lose, not win-win. And so you really need to take a step back if you want the value from your investment in digital, and think about your commercial relationships with your partners in a win-win scenario. So that gets into collaborative, incentive-oriented contracts that go after the value together, jointly, instead of independently.
It almost always seems to be not about the technology, but about the human mindset and how it embraces the technology. But Andy Webster of Accenture Industry X, thank you so much for sharing some of the results of this recent research into digitization efforts, why they're not meeting expectations, and how they can be made to do so. Thank you very much for being with me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. Happy to help.